In Lebanon, his supporters were hanging on his every word, so were political leaders around the world. How would the leader of the Hezbollah militant group respond to 2 days of attacks from exploding pagers and walkie-talkies apparently detonated by Israel's secret service? Even in the middle of Hassan Nasrallah's televised address, Israeli forces managed to spread more panic, flying fighter jets fast and low over the Lebanese capital Beirut, creating frightening claps of sonic boom. In his address, Nasrallah admitted Hezbollah had been hit hard. He said Israel's attacks could be called a declaration of war. Red lines had been crossed. But other than keeping up daily cross-border rocket attacks on northern Israel, there was no set retaliation yet. Underlining the danger of the situation, the Foreign Secretary David Lammy said all Britons in Lebanon should get out now while they still could.
Israel says it's determined to regain its northern territory at any cost. Tonight, it seems a renewed effort is underway. Witnesses we've spoken to in the past hours report the heaviest wave of attacks over the border to Lebanon since the start of this phase of the war in October. Earlier, Hezbollah's leader vowed to avenge Israel's believed dual assaults on its communication network and people. As he spoke, the sound of Israel's warplanes drowned out his words. The menace of sonic boom shaking Beirut streets. Hassan Nasrallah's speech was to two audiences: the allies shaken by the past days and enemies who've brought such harm to his organisation.
The Israeli enemy targeted thousands of pagers. They were detonated at the same time. The enemy crossed all the rules, laws and red lines.
The attacks left 37 people dead and thousands injured when pagers and radios exploded. Nasrallah said the attacks had not broken Hezbollah and warned there would be a response.
This will be confronted with a severe reckoning and a just punishment in expected and unexpected ways.
In Lebanon's hospitals, many of those who survived are realising the life-changing nature of their injuries, with fingers, hands, parts of the lower body and sight lost. Doctors have travelled from around the world to help, including Dr. Rassan Abu Sitta, a British-Palestinian plastic surgeon. When yesterday the first reports started to come in of the second wave of attacks, what was your feeling?
It was a sense of incredulity and a fear, because the walkie-talkies are bigger, that the explosive quantity is much higher. And I think and now there's just fear of all electronic devices that have been imported into the country.
What's the feeling from all these people that you're treating who are suffering from such similar injuries?
There's a fear that this is the beginning of something major, that something as big as this is going to have political and military consequences, and that we're about to see a much bigger regional war happen in Lebanon.
There is a sense of escalation in actions and words. Israel has vowed to return the displaced to their homes on the northern border. Hezbollah has vowed to maintain its attacks until a ceasefire is secured in Gaza. Both seem committed to attack their way to the peace they claim to seek. Emma Murphy, News at 10, Beirut.
Well, while the Hezbollah leader was talking, his fighters were firing rockets into northern Israel, killing 2 Israeli soldiers, and Israeli warplanes were bombing southern Lebanon. Well, this is a live shot of that border tonight. That exchange of hostilities has been going on pretty much uninterrupted since October. But on the ground, there are signs that Israel is threatening to send its troops across.
The quickest way to clear a minefield. These pictures show Israeli engineers destroying their own mines close to the border with Lebanon. They're ensuring that any IDF invasion force ordered north isn't hoist on its own petard. A division that did some of the heavy fighting in Gaza has now been redeployed to a northern frontier that's been active on an almost daily basis since October the 8th, when Hezbollah opened fire in solidarity with Hamas. 60,000 residents from northern communities have not been able to return home ever since. Today, 2 more Israeli soldiers were killed by Hezbollah ordnance, another ominous development. The build-up of IDF forces is being matched by tougher talk from Israeli officials.
Israel is responding with force to this aggression by Hezbollah. We will use all means necessary to restore security to our northern border and to safely return our citizens to their homes.
The descent towards an invasion and all-out war is starting to look unstoppable, even though this is a disastrous slow march we've seen before. Israeli soldiers we filmed leaving the zone were delighted to be doing so. In May 2000, 18 years after invading, the IDF withdrew from South Lebanon. They'd been occupying a buffer zone in which troops became too vulnerable as Hezbollah stepped up its attacks.
This is a far cry from the West Bank and the Gaza Strip.
6 years later, a cross-border attack by Hezbollah kicked off what would become known as the Second Lebanon War. It lasted a month and ended in a bloody stalemate.
18 years later, we're on the brink of a third Lebanon war, and the fact that both sides now have much more potent arsenals means it threatens to be far deadlier than anything that's gone before. John Irvine, News at 10, Tel Aviv.
Well, the United Nations said tonight an early investigation by the Lebanese authorities found that explosives had been placed inside the pagers and walkie-talkies before they arrived in the country. Not so surprising, perhaps, but today we did learn a bit more about their route in, and Chloe's been finding out. Do you want to take us through it, Chloe?
Yeah, so just starting with those walkie-talkies, Julie, if you look at the photos of the aftermath of the attacks, you can see that some of them bear the name of a company called ICOM, which is based in Japan. Now, ICOM's director said today it hasn't made or exported that particular model for 10 years. But speaking to ITV News yesterday, a company representative said there had been an issue with counterfeiting, particularly in the Middle East. So they claim they have no way of knowing for sure what route those walkie-talkies might have taken to get to Lebanon. Today, we did learn a bit more about the route the pagers could have gone. We heard yesterday from the head of a Taiwanese company called Gold Apollo. Now, they've denied making them, pointing instead at another manufacturer in Hungary. And now there are reports linking a third company to their supply, this time based in Bulgaria. Bulgarian authorities have told us today that they've checked the customs papers and they can't find any record of the pagers having come from Bulgaria. But they've also confirmed they are now investigating whether this company was involved in supplying them. We've looked up its records, which have it listed at an address in what appears to be a residential block in the Bulgarian capital. It was registered at around the same time as the Hungarian business, which itself is listed on a quiet suburban street. The New York Times has reported today that the Hungarian firm is an Israeli front, but neither they nor the Bulgarian company, Julie, has responded to our phone calls or our emails today.
OK, Chloe, thank you very much indeed for that. Fascinating. Well, we can speak now to Emma, who joins us from Beirut. And Emma, we've spoken on many occasions over this past year with you there in Beirut. People are really fearing the worst. Is it different this time round, do you think?
Well, there have been 3 previous messages for people, UK citizens, to leave this country. They haven't ended up in the worst-case scenario, which was what was planned for. But I understand from sources in Whitehall tonight that there are serious conversations going on now about the UK's military posture and what they would do if they had to send some kind of military evacuation fleet in to get people out. Also this evening, David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, has called for an immediate ceasefire in Lebanon. Now, what's striking about that is that this country isn't officially in a state of war. However, all the actions are of war and of really quite active warfare, especially in the last few days. So it does show how there is a real ramping up of the concern and of the worry about what might be happening going forward. What I think is concerning people the most is the fact that the pager plot that Israel put into place this week was never meant to be activated quite so soon, but it got rumbled, so they went early. It was, in theory, meant to be a precursor to some kind of ground invasion, but they didn't have, and they don't now have, the troops in place to be able to do that. And the worry from sources that I've been speaking to is that that will mean that they will pause on the ground invasion just for a short time, but potentially move those bomb attacks that we've seen over the last few days and weeks further north, and potentially that brings Beirut back into the potential firing line.